Howdy, folks, and welcome back to Toonie Talk. I am Super Koopa, and today we're going to be talking about what is perhaps my favorite cartoon of all time, Ed, Edd n Eddy, Cartoon Network's longest-running series created by Danny Antonucci. I did a video on Ed, Edd n Eddy on the Why It Worked series, and unfortunately it got copyright-stricken by YouTube because I ended up putting the intro on loop muted, and apparently that wasn't considered transformative. I hate this website sometimes, but I decided I wanted to include it in the Toonie Talk series because it is quite simply one of my favorite TV shows of all time in any genre. It is one of my favorite cartoons of all time, it is one of my favorite TV shows of all time, and it is one of the best pieces of media I've ever watched. I've set pretty high expectations if you've never seen the show, but I believe this show embodies what a cartoon is. It has got fantastic slapstick. It has got great characterization. It's got great storytelling from beginning, middle, and end for the majority of the show's episodes. It never takes itself too seriously. The only time the show takes itself uber seriously is in the movie, and it absolutely earns it because of how much time you've spent with the characters up to that point. It is absolutely fantastic. Everybody who's watched this series has their favorite characters, their most hated characters, their favorite episodes, their most hated episodes. My favorite character, as far as the main trio of Ed, Edd n Eddy is concerned, is probably Ed with the single D and the green jacket. Ed is lovable, he's strong, he is good-hearted, but he's also a nerd when it comes to media, like comic books and movies and television. And he goes along with Eddie's shenanigans, if for no other reason than Eddie is probably his only friend, along with Double D. You know, the trio have the dynamic of being outcasts, and they spend the entire series trying to gain the neighborhood's kids' favor while simultaneously scamming them. Or at least Eddie does. And I'm going to talk about the movie towards the tail end of this, because I think the movie is critical to the show, because it is one of the best conclusions to a series I could have ever asked for. It is tremendous. But I'll go over the synopsis from Wikipedia here. I know, reading Wikipedia articles is a stupid way to do it, but I think it sums it up in the best way possible. Ed, Edd n Eddy follows the lives of the Eds, three scheming boys who all share variations of nicknames of the name Edward, but differ greatly in their personalities. Ed, with one D, voiced by Matt Hill, is the strong and dim-witted yet kind-hearted dog's body of the group. Ed, with two Ds, voiced by Samuel Vincent, called Double D, is an inventor, neat freak, and the most intelligent of the Eds. And Eddie, voiced by Tony Simpson, is a devious, quick-tempered, bitter con artist and self-appointed leader of the Eds. The three devise plans to obtain money from the other kids in their cul-de-sac, which they want to use to buy jawbreakers. However, problems always ensue, and the Eds' schemes usually end in failure and humiliation. That is a really good summary. So, for the first, I want to say 3 to 4 seasons, possibly the first 3 seasons, the primary setting is the cul-de-sac, which is their neighborhood. It doesn't really have a name, it's just a generic cul-de-sac, but it's a big cul-de-sac. Many people guesstimate as to when the series is set. If I was to guess, I'd say roughly the mid to late 1970s, although I don't know if it's ever really been confirmed by Danny Antonucci when the series takes place. But there are a lot of people who speculate based on the fact that there's rabbit ear TVs, there's VHSs, and there are even vehicles shown at some point. And it all gives off a 1970s vibe. And what Eddie's into, the way his room is decorated, there's a lot of disco references. And early 70s was the era of disco. So it very much is that. You never see smartphones, you never even see cell phones. It's just a product of its time, which most people assume is the 70s. I think it was confirmed that even though it was made in Canada, it's based in the United States, or it's based around a neighborhood in the United States, although it's very innocuous. We find out the town they live in is called Peach Creek, but we don't find that out until, I want to say, the 4th or 5th season. I think it's at least the 4th season we find out. But before then, it's just referenced as the cul-de-sac, and They mention that they're in the suburbs, so they're in the suburbs of a city. Peach Creek being a suburb of something or other. But why do I like this show? Why is it possibly my favorite Cartoon Network series of all time? Well, it's a cartoon, and I love cartoons, but this is a cartoon that goes above and beyond to be a cartoon. Oh, I just noticed Nickelodeon's got a new logo. Oh, it's like they did a variation of the Splat. They introduced this March. I like that. Okay, I'm getting sidetracked here. It's a cartoon. It is a cartoon that doesn't try to be anything other than a cartoon. The slapstick is off the wall. Every hit looks like it hurts. They defy the laws of physics repeatedly, even though they have a science nerd in the group who is constantly in awe of this fact. As far as the conflicts and the resolutions and everything, it's totally unrealistic. They take a simple, realistic premise and they just make it completely wacky and insane. They do things that should kill them. But it's a cartoon. It takes slapstick to the highest possible degree, and you can tell it's very Stooges inspired, but it takes that to the next level. And I think that's why I like it, because I'm a massive Three Stooges fan. I have been since I was little, along with when I used to watch it, Artful Thinking. And I don't know what his thoughts are on this. I'll have to get him on the podcast at some point to talk about it. But this series is absolutely spectacular to me. It just hit a chord that other shows on Cartoon Network didn't. There are a lot of fantastic shows on Cartoon Network, and I'll probably end up talking about all of the ones that I like at some point through Toonie Talk, but this one is at the top of every list. I'm tempted right now to try to find a way to make this image into an actual poster, because I love this show. This show, to me, is my childhood. I watched from beginning to end. It is spectacular. It was the SpongeBob of Cartoon Network for me. In fact, I'll probably have to do a review / retrospective of the first season of Ed, Edd n Eddy once I'm done with the first season of SpongeBob. Because I feel equally as passionate about both shows. They're absolutely spectacular. The only difference is Ed, Edd n Eddy had a definitive end where SpongeBob is still going and it's declining in quality, and if anything, it's a mixed bag. It's getting spin-offs. But Ed, Edd n Eddy, they cut it off right at the right point with the movie, with the Big Picture show, to the point where people are like, well, is it going to be rebooted? What is Danny Antonucci going to do next? Because I don't know if he's really done anything else. I mean, he did things before Ed, Edd n Eddy. He created Lupo the Butcher, Cartoon Sushi, The Brothers Grunt. Took a job at Hanna-Barbera. I still contend that Cartoon Network was at its best when it still had the Hanna-Barbera label. I don't know what it was, but it was the best time for the network. Now, when they made Cartoon Network Studios, they had some hits. Now they're being folded into Warner Brothers, and it's just not the same. I think the Warner oversight is just, it's too much, and they want to play it too safe. So it's just spectacular, though. I mean, all of the characters, you've got the littlest kids, which are Jimmy and Sarah. Jimmy being very meek and feeble and always staying around Sarah with a comically large head brace. You've got Sarah, who has a ridiculous temper, always gets mad, and always hurts the Eds in some way or another. You've got the older kids, which are Rolf, Naz, and Kevin. I couldn't even think of his name. Kevin being the hot shot of the neighborhood. He's got the nicest bike. He thinks he's the coolest guy. He's always making fun of the Eds, calling them dorks. He's somewhat of the neighborhood jock / bully. Naz is the girl. Naz is kind of plain, the best way to describe her. She's kind of down to earth. She's down with everything. She always hangs out with Kevin the most. Kevin's always trying to impress her, and they go into that aspect more in the movie in terms of what their actual relationship is, and they've got really heartwarming character development in that. And then you've got Rolf, who is an immigrant, and he's very eccentric. He speaks English, but he's got a very weird dialect and a very weird way of speaking, and a culture that is quite clearly Slavic in some ways, but it's very over the top in terms of tradition. His house is basically a small farm. He's got pigs, chickens, a cow. that sort of thing. He is actually considered one of the best characters in the series because of his eccentric nature and the way that he deals with things. And some of his lines are just, oh, they're out of this world. And then you've got Johnny and Plank. Johnny being sort of middle range age of the kids. I think he's more around the Ed's age, maybe a little older than Sarah and Jimmy. Kind of out to lunch a little bit, similar to Ed. He's got a best friend, which is a 2x4 plank of wood. His last name is ironically 2x4, very creative. He's got one of the best voices in the series. I really applaud his voice actor. He's kind of a comic relief character in and of himself, and the movie also plays into this fact. He's kind of a joke character in many ways. He doesn't have a whole lot of character development. He's just kind of the out there weirdo that everybody just kind of tolerates. I think people are more sympathetic to the Eds, and again, the movie expresses this. I'll talk about the movie when I'm actually done, but his character is often seen as kind of a bumbling fool and crazy because he talks to this plank of wood. Although you can argue there's a supernatural element to the show because sometimes the plank of wood does stuff on its own, seemingly, and it's very weird, but it also makes for interesting storytelling. So you have him, and then lastly, you have the last three characters, which are the Canker sisters. They're sort of a antagonist. The Eds end up meeting them in Season 1, Episode 2 or Episode 3, Nag to Ed. I'm remembering this off the top of my head. I'm not reading the Wikipedia. I don't have the episode thing open, but based on my knowledge, it's Episode 2 or 3. It's called Nag to Ed. I've watched it repeatedly because it's just so funny. Initially, they fall in love with the Eds, but then they end up becoming, quite frankly, very creepy. They're basically stalker-ish, and they always want to get the Eds and corral them and kiss them, which I guess is the family-friendly way of what they're really trying to get at, or what you can infer if you're a bit older of what they're trying to do. They're villains of the series, but their advances are not wanted by the Eds, we'll say, and as a result, they're probably some of the most hated characters. But they also have their own characters. You got, what are the names of the Canker sisters? You've got May, Marie, and Lee, and they've all got their own personalities. They're what you might call trailer trash. It's kind of a stereotype. Very tough girls, kind of not very attractive. But they're tough. They're almost like bullies. There's times where all of the neighborhood kids are afraid of them because they're kind of like bullies. There's one episode where they go looking for their ship in a bottle and they end up tearing up the neighborhood, and it's like the apocalypse. Rolf is kind of the first one alerted to it. That's a good episode. I can't remember what it was. I think it's in season 4 or 5. Really interesting characters. They show up as a foil to the Eds almost every time. Not my favorite characters, if I'm honest. It's just kind of predictable what's going to happen when they're on screen. They keep reusing the gag where they end up just capturing the Eds, and I don't know, it just kind of gets old to me. It's a little disturbing, but it's also kind of funny. It's just a little disturbing what they're implying. I'll talk about their conclusion in the movie because it doesn't change. Let's go ahead and talk about the movie because the series at this point, I believe I want to say season 5 is when they introduced their school. They're in Peach Creek Middle School. And from then on, they have a couple of specials. They have a Valentine's Day special, a Halloween special, and a Christmas special, all taking place between the cul-de-sac and the school. And the movie takes place. The series has a recurring gag of Eddie mentioning his older brother in various ways, in terms of ideas of scams he came up with, in terms of just things that he does, things that he's learned. And the movie starts out with, they had the scam of all scams and it went completely awry, and the neighborhood kids basically want to kill him. So they're on the run from home. They're trying to run away from the neighborhood kids. They don't know what to do. They're all blaming, Double D and Eddie are blaming each other for what went wrong. And then Eddie comes up with the idea they're going to go find his big brother. So they follow a bunch of clues that he left. And ultimately, it's the story. The main premise is that the Eds are trying to find Eddie's big brother, and the neighborhood kids are trying to chase. And Kevin realizes that what Eddie is planning to do is to go to his big brother, so they need to catch them before they get to him. Well, long story short, they end up getting to his big brother, and he's the first new character that the series has introduced, and the only new character, which is just an awesome way to end a series. You know, we've heard about this guy throughout the entirety of the series. We never see the parent. It's very much like Charlie Brown. I think we see Eddie's dad's arm once and Ed's mom's arm once, but that's as far as we get. And it turns out that Eddie's brother is a horrible bully. You know, he constantly beats Eddie up and belittles him. And the neighborhood kids witness this, and they have a change of heart, and they decide to let the Eds into their group after Eddie confesses that all he was ever trying to do was just be cool in the eyes of the neighborhood kids, and that he just lied about his brother being cool just to seem cool. So they are sympathetic with him because they realize that, man, Eddie has had to deal with this guy for the majority of his life. So, but you see so much character development. You see Naz and Kevin get into a fight and then reconcile, and you know, Naz struggles with the fact that Kevin really loves his bike. His bike is constantly threatened, and he constantly is trying to repair it and is ignoring her. You see Eddie and Double D come to blows over their differences that have been boiling up throughout the series. You know, Double D being the reasonable one and feeling like Eddie never listens to him, and Eddie feeling like he's nothing but a nag that gets in the way, and finally they butt heads, and Ed is the one who has to come in and be a voice of reason. You have Rolf, which is just being completely eccentric and doing things his own way, but running into his own shenanigans. I don't remember much about Rolf's what Rolf gets into, but you've got Johnny exploring his alter ego as Captain Melonhead, and he shows up at the very end when everybody's reconciled with Ed, and Eddie, and he comes in thinking everybody's still mad and tries to beat the Eds up, and he ends up getting beat up himself and ends up becoming a villain called the Gourd, and that's when they cut the end of the movie. He's talking to Plank, and Plank tells him it's over. He goes, "What do you mean it's over?" So he's just treated as a joke character. He doesn't really have an arc or development. He's just Johnny. You know, you need a just Johnny in your series. Sarah and Jimmy, I don't think we explore too much with Sarah and Jimmy. Maybe, I think it's Jimmy that ends up being the catalyst for trying to forgive Eddie, you know, and just reconcile. I think he ends up being the voice of reason of the neighborhood kids and shows a little bit more maturity than he's had in the past. I think that's what they were trying to do with Jimmy. It's a fantastic thing. Ed, and Eddie, the Big Picture Show. I would have went to see it in theaters multiple times if it was in theaters, but it was just a TV movie. But it was the perfect conclusion to the series because we got almost everything we wanted. The only thing we didn't get was what is under Double D's hat, which is a recurring joke throughout the series. That's the one thing that they just left a complete mystery. And it frustrated a lot of people. You know, I remember seeing message boards and things where people were like, well, what are we going to get to solve this mystery? Somebody's got to hound Danny Antonucci so we can get some sort of answer. But the reality is, it's just a red herring as far as I'm concerned. It's just, they didn't know what was under his hat. They just left it up to the audience to keep people engaged. It was just a fun thing that they did. They didn't really have a plan for it, or maybe they did. I don't know. But either way, we never got an answer to that burning question, but almost it didn't matter because almost everything else was satisfactory with the end. And so now people are talking about, will the show get rebooted? You know, will Cartoon Network do that? And there's every chance they could. I mean, they rebooted the Powerpuff Girls, and I'm hearing each day about new reboots of old TV series that I never even heard about, but it's all on streaming, so honestly, I don't want them to remake this series. This show did so good. It had a definitive beginning, middle, and end. We saw character development both in the series and especially in the movie. Everything about it was great. There's not one thing that they could do other than do an extra season if they wanted to, but it's unnecessary. They'd just be doing it for the sake of doing it. The voice actors have all aged, so they're going to sound a little different, but it's not necessary. Yeah, I don't see it being necessary. I wouldn't mind it if it's done. If you can get the key writers and Danny Antonucci to do a final season, I wouldn't mind that. But if you're talking about a reboot, like the Powerpuff Girls was, that is an instant no for me. A reboot, reanimation, I don't want to see that. Maybe a TV special like what they did with Invader Zim or Rocco's Modern Life, less so like Rocco's because I was very political. And that's the other worry. This show was apolitical. This show was largely inoffensive in that sense. It had some innuendo from time to time, and that was the most offensive thing. Maybe some slapstick with the slapstick, you could argue cartoon violence, but it wasn't controversial. They didn't mention it. It was ambiguous as to what time period it was in, for crying out loud. So there were no references to any presidents or politicians or political issues. I mean, they destroyed half of the environments that they were in. It was hilarious. It was just a fun cartoon, and that's why it's my favorite, because it is grounded in the sense that it doesn't try to be anything more than a cartoon and to deal with situations that kids in a cartoon would deal with. It is a good kid-friendly show. If you've got kids, find a way to show them this show. I don't know if it's on HBO Max or where it is. I don't think it's on syndication and Cartoon Network anymore, but show them this show. They will love it. Age range, probably start at about 10 or 12, maybe 13. I'm trying to think of how old I was. I was roughly 10 when this show came out. So it's probably a good place to start, and then just have them watch it continuously. You know? They'll enjoy it, and if you watch it yourself, what a great thing to share with your children, because it's a fantastic show. It is. If you want to know what a cartoon is, if you've got a kid who's good at drawing, they're like, I want to make a cartoon, have them watch Ed, Edd n Eddy, because this is the standard for what a cartoon should be. It really is. It's got edge to it, but it's also very slapsticky. It's got its own animation style that is very unique, and I love, because it's got like a, you can tell early on, it's got like a sort of a weird frame thing going on where the characters are constantly moving. I forget what the animation technique is called, but it looks like the characters are constantly moving and shaking slightly. And oh my gosh, I got to talk about the scenery. The detail in this show is bonkers. I spent probably an entire summer going through different background shots of this show, of some of the houses and things. The level of detail that's there that is completely unnecessary is out of this world, and I gotta praise it, because you've got garage doors that have all different panels on them. Some of them reuse designs, but they're very real world in the way that they look. Some houses have shingles, and you can see siding. You can see sheen on windows in later seasons, and you can see grain texture on wood, and texture on blades of grass even, and the reflection on dew. Just small things that you only see for a moment, but as the series goes on and the animation becomes more digital, they go into more detail, and it's so unnecessary, but good. Like, look at the poster in front of you. The poster in front of you, you see the treads on the tire, you see the shadow on the cinder block, you see the specks of dirt around the tire and two clumps of grass. It's beautiful. You see all sorts of details that aren't even necessary. Eddie's got 3 sort of birthmarks on his head. You look long enough and you watch the series enough and you see these small details and you're in awe of them, because they're so unnecessary, but they make the world feel real despite the fact it's so unreal being a cartoon. It is really spectacular, and I really have to applaud the fact that they did this, because it's so unnecessary. There's a lot of fast-moving shots in this show, and in the midst of that, you get a lot of detail. When something's being destroyed or torn up, like if they tear up a street, you see sort of the underlay, like the underlayer of dirt on the pavement. It's awesome. You see the dirt underneath the grass. They didn't need to do any of that, but they did. And it's all the better for it. This is a show, once you watch it through regularly, you got to go back and pause in moments just to catch the detail that they put on some of the set pieces, because my gosh, what a team that's willing to do that. What a team. It's absolutely spectacular. I love this show. I've got to do a review/retrospective on it. Let me know if that's what you want me to do, because I'm absolutely willing to do it, but I've got to get through SpongeBob first. I got to finish that first season. I've been putting it off because I'm doing all of these series on the side and, dealing with some health issues in between, so I haven't really had the time to go ahead and do it the way that I should, but this show is spectacular. This is a 10 out of 10. This might be the only 10 out of 10 you get in Toonie Talk. It is a 10 out of 10. The last couple things I say, there are episodes that I don't like. The episode where Jimmy wants to get revenge on Eddie for Wedgie is one of the worst episodes of the series, along with Sorry Wrong Ed, where Eddie gets a cursed phone from Ralph, or Rolf, not Ralph. He gets a cursed phone from Rolf. Everything starts to go wrong, and Double D is acting like a really smarmy, just denial. Like he's almost an allegory for the worst kind of atheist that just is in complete denial of the world around him and just is like, there's a rational explanation for everything, even though the most irrational things are happening around him. He's just wildly out of character. Those two episodes in particular are ones that I just don't like to watch. I usually skip over them because they just, you've got Jimmy, who's acting out of character as a jerk and just trying to get revenge on something that's pretty commonplace and something that he should have been able to get over. They just kind of... Somebody said it was Danny Antonucci's favorite episode. I don't know, but it's kind of weird. It's just they ruin the character of Jimmy with that, and then he gets sort of a comeuppance at the end, but it's not really satisfying what happens to him compared to all the trauma he puts Ed and Eddie through, who are the ones we're rooting for in this series. It's just, it's a bad episode. I can't stand it. And Sorry Wrong Ed is definitely up there with it. There's probably a couple others that I'm thinking of that I don't like, but most of the episodes have some redeeming quality to them. It's just those two that are just terrible in terms of the way they're structured, the way things happen. Like the one where Jimmy tries to get revenge. I wish I knew the name of it, and I should probably look it up, but I'm getting close to wrapping this up. All of the characters just are vicious towards the Eds because the Eds are being framed for everything, and it's ridiculous. I don't like it. I don't like when the main characters who we're supposed to like just take a beating for no reason, for no fault of their own, except for what Eddie did. So it's just terrible, but the rest are all memorable. I'd highly recommend the series. 10 out of 10, 100%. Best Cartoon Network has ever done and maybe ever will do. Let me know what your thoughts are on the series, your memories, what you liked. Leave a comment down below. I'm always happy to engage with folks. Thank you very much for watching. This has been Super Koopa with another Toonie Talk, and I will see you guys next time. God bless. Have a good one. Peace.